Hello everyone, this is Professor Reha back with the Grim Dawn walkthrough. Now, we just killed Shanks, so now we will be proceeding through at least some of the infamous Cronley gang episode. Now, if you have the right resistances and you are prepared, you really won't have that bad of a time. Now, as I mentioned going through, I believe it was Burwich, the resistances that you need for a given area are something you should really prepare for. For Burwich, that's elemental damage, aether damage, and regular old physical damage, or the primary damage types you encounter, with some poison and acid as well. Yeah, I don't need these. So that is fairly easy to get, since a lot of the early reward equipment from completing the side quests, such as the Sister's Amulet of Life-Giving and the Leather Doublet, both give you elemental resistance. Poison and acid resistance is not that difficult to come across usually, and you can always build anti-venom salves out of the blacksmith menu if you really needed some more. And similar thing with aether resistance. You can build components that will boost that for you if you really need it. Now, again, I've been fairly decently lucky with my equipment and haven't really needed to do so. You can see my poison and acid resistance is currently a little low, but remember that I had it at least over 30 back when I was going through Burwich and Burwich outskirts and stuff. If you've been paying attention, I have sacrificed my poison and acid resistance, because at this particular point, going through what I call episode 2, I don't really need it. The big damage types present here are piercing, physical of course, but there's pretty much always going to be physical. Just assume physical, which your regular armor will take care of. So as long as your regular armor is sufficiently high, it's not really that big of a problem. But you've got piercing, fire, and aether is the big damage types, and a splash of cold and vitality, but I'll point that out when I come to it. That's a couple of very specific locations. So, if you know what's coming, you can kind of adjust and prioritize specific resistances, at least in the short term, to better deal with that. Is there? There's no totem up there, at least. It doesn't look like there is. Nah, we're not going to bother fighting these guys, because I am kind of pushing the border of the level that I really should be at. These guys are, on an average, 25. This guy's 26, which means he's probably pushing the upper edge. It's possible he's exactly the average, but he was a pretty big boy, so I'm guessing that the regular enemies are looking to be about 24, 25, roughly my level, and I'm on the absolute verge of getting another level up. So it is something that I will want to be, keeping an eye on and not necessarily pushing too much. I will be taking a couple of detours again for the newer players to see some areas or be able to better adapt to certain areas. There's one in particular that is optional that, again, normally I wouldn't want to go through, but I will because it is very important for planning your short-term resistances. So we're just going to waltz through here. This is all just basically looking for stuff while I'm at the same level. This is my big opportunity to get some slightly better equipment in this next act, so to speak, of the game with Cronley's gang. This is an opportunity to get some stuff that maybe will better serve me. My fire resistance is pretty good right now. My pierce resistance is okay, so I'm not worried about my fire resistance really. I am mildly worried about my vitality. My aether is a little lower than I would like it to be at this particular junction for this point in the game. My piercing resistance could also be slightly higher, but overall they're not so low that I'm going to necessarily have a problem, and that's partially because I do have the more defensive build. I have Menhir's Will, I have a shield, so I can afford to slack a little bit on resistances. So if you don't have a shield or you don't have some form of defensive ability that you can rely on, it's more important than normal to pay attention to your resistances, to really make sure you've got the right resistances for the scenario you're in. And like I said, for this particular area, you're looking at fire, piercing, aether, and a little bit of vitality at the very least. A little bit of cold maybe, but if you're building elemental resistances, a lot of what you had equipped for the first act up to Warden Krieg is going to serve you just fine here. You primarily will be looking to drop off your poison and acid. Yeah, you can. There is a small amount of enemies that deal consistent poison and acid damage, which you can worry about, but quite frankly, regardless of what class combination you have, the enemies that I'm talking about, which are the Hornets, are so easy to kill that, generally speaking, they don't get a chance to do a lot of poison damage, with the exception of heroes and bosses. So if you're particularly unlucky, then maybe contemplate getting boosting up the poison acid resistance a little bit, but personally, I've never needed to for this act of the game, because I've just never had a problem killing the Hornets. They've just died so very quickly, because they have very low health and resistances, that it just was never a problem, except for a specific boss that is a bit of a problem if you aren't prepared for her. But again, you can use this, the Venom Guard ointment. You probably have one by this point, if you've been exploring and going where, everywhere I've been going. And if you've been exploring a little farther afield because you were lower level and went through a couple of the places that I skipped initially, for exactly the reasons of not wanting to overlevel, and I'll come back to them later, then you're going to definitely find that you will probably have one of these. If not, you should be able to make them. I can't remember if that's a default recipe or not. Hello. These guys are hitting a little hard. What are they level? Oh, it's because they're 3 levels higher than me. That does explain it. That would be why. Oh. Alright, you hit quite there we go, and then here's Will's disactivated, so we can probably finish you off, honestly. You're also stunned me, so that's not particularly kosher. There we go. I need Menrir's Will to be higher. Ooh, hello. Come on, there you go. Nope, what is this? There we go. It also occurs to me that I'm level 25, actually, so let's take a look at relics really quick. I know there's a side quest there, hold on. I forgot I was level 25, so let's go back and talk about relics again. This is the point at which you should really be upgrading your relic again. Pardon me, I really needed a sip of tea there. So, generally speaking, there are some relics, as I discussed earlier, that are level 18, and if you're the right class combination, you can really take advantage of these. For example, Equilibrium, which I've got, anything that does elemental damage, if you're a first-time player, or alternatively, if you're not sure what your second class is going to be, or if you really just want to start getting a little bit more powerful a little earlier, pick Equilibrium if you are running with Demolitionist, Inquisitor, Arcanist, obviously, or Oathkeeper if you're not going for a poison acid build. These 4 use Equilibrium. Ruination is very specifically pretty much anything that uses pierce damage. This can be any class if you equip the right weapons, but generally speaking it's geared towards Nightblades. Shamans if you're really picky with your equipment. Inquisitors, Demolitionists, if either of those equip guns, which they lend themselves to, and Necromancers. And finally, the other one that you very likely have is Calamity, which is fire damage. If you're going for fire damage, Demolitionist or Oathkeeper, obviously this is also a really good pick. Now, you may be wondering, well, how do I decide between Calamity and Equilibrium, say, if I'm a Demolitionist? Primarily because what you're really looking for is, do you need the damage of Calamity, or do you need the mild amounts of survival from Tranquility? And that really is going to depend on how durable you are. Personally, I prefer Equilibrium for the early game. I mean, level 18, you're going to be coming up against Warden Krieg soon at that point. You're going through all of these zombies, which have various elemental damage types. The elemental resistance out of Equilibrium, usually I prioritize over whatever fire damage Calamity is providing for me. Unless I am, for some reason, abnormally tanky. For example, I might pick Calamity if I'm playing an Oathkeeper Soldier combination. I would possibly prefer Calamity over Equilibrium because at that particular point I have so much defense and I have so many defensive skills available to me that really damage isn't going to be that much of a problem. But we're level 25 now, so we're going to be wanting to look through some of these, and keep in mind, while most of these you will have, not all of them, and I don't remember off the top of my head which ones you will and will not have access to. So, we have to be pretty careful about this. We could do a Mistborn Talisman, except I don't have a Troll Club. This one I think is not default. I think you have to find this recipe. I don't do bleeding. What I'm looking for is I can do two different things. I can do Spectre, potentially, or I can do Sanctuary. Now, for this particular point in the game, and I'm pretty sure Spectre's a recipe anyways, I could, if you're thinking to yourself, well, you could pick Squall, or you could pick, where is that? Inferno, because your build does do Fire Aether, theoretically speaking, and I have stated that I am kind of leaning in that direction, and you're right, I could, but there's two problems with this. First off, the way I have built so far does not lend itself necessarily to fire. If I already had Kalidor's Tempest, if I had skipped over Menhir's Will, gone straight to Kalidor's Tempest, I would say, well, yeah, maybe that would be a good idea, or maybe even Spectre would be a good idea, possibly. The reason why I'm ultimately not going to go with Spectre is, A, there is vitality damage in Spectral Bolt, B, I already have Panetti's Replicating Missiles, so that's unnecessary, and C, you'll notice Spectre increases Chaos Resistance, Inferno increases no resistance, but Sanctuary gives you Pierce Resistance, and a 20% chance of 1 second stun. Retaliation, which means whenever you're hit. And furthermore, you have the famous Sanctuary passive skill, and Sanctuary does not require you to have a shield. It doesn't require anything specific. For this specific reason, plus the 8% health, but that only matters for certain classes, we're going to go with Sanctuary. I'm going to create and equip Sanctuary. Now, again, Equilibrium is not a bad thing to stick with. I could absolutely stick with Spirit. I could keep that 20% elemental resistance, and I could have myself a grand old time with that. You are correct. It wouldn't be a bad move for me to keep Equilibrium. However, the problem here being that I don't necessarily need complete elemental resistance at this particular junction. So I really don't need all of that elemental resistance. As I stated before, I am going to be looking to focus a little bit more in on the fire damage. I'm actually going to sell my items while I'm here. I should probably put my scrap back because I'm carrying around 291 scrap. I really don't need to be. But yes, personally for this particular build, and as an overall recommendation, I would say take Sanctuary. It gives you a little bit of tankiness in an area that is going to be a little bit more difficult than the area you just went through. If you had a hard time with Warden Krieg, get Sanctuary. It will save your life more times than probably anyone would even know about, because it is a passive, it happens automatically. So yes, I will be taking Sanctuary here very specifically. I don't mind sacrificing a little bit of damage for better survivability, especially since piercing damage is otherwise really tough to deal with. I prefer the shoulders that I have, even though I probably get a bit more damage benefit out of the old ones. You can see, first off, I don't need that kind of retaliation. There's only aether resistance, whereas I get elemental resistance and physical resistance out of my current shoulders. It's just not worth it. Elemental damage. See, this is a good ring for me, the Tempest Moonstone, Band of Alacrity. It gives me elemental damage, which I really need. It gives me bleeding resistance, which I don't really need. But I can, in fact, swap this with the Ordered Gold Band of Butchery. I lose the elemental resistance, I lose the health, but I get offensive ability, I get energy, I get attack speed. So my cadence will hit much harder, which is really what I'm looking for at this particular junction, but I don't have the spirit to equip this. Which, we'll work our way towards. It's not that big of a deal. And this still, even though it has more armor, the resistances just aren't as worth. And I don't do enough lightning damage specifically to make that even in consideration. Like I said, if you get a monster infrequent that really benefits your class, you're gonna keep it for probably a really long time. Although I may have to replace it at some point in the near future. More and then here's Will. So we can get that nice and strong so I can survive almost everything. We're going to complete this quest here. Generally you do the top response because you get a little bit of bonus experience. You can do the middle response, get a little bit of iron bits, but quite frankly at this point you really shouldn't be worrying too much about iron bits unless you're a really flagrant spender. Like I said in a previous episode, you really don't want to be buying any equipment out of the merchants at this particular point because you're going to be replacing it so quickly in most situations anyways, especially if you get a monster infrequent that goes into the same slot, in which case you just wasted your money, because the monster infrequent, if it matches your skill combination or either one of your skills, is going to be so much more valuable to you than anything else. Now, what's really interesting about Sanctuary, you see it's triggered down there, right here, is that it doesn't care what level of health you're at when it activates. So that's a pretty interesting and significant factor and really can help keep your damage intake a little bit more manageable. Alright, so this is one of the places where you really, this is the group kind of, this is the, I won't say group, the faction that you really want to have your vitality damage up on. The undead tend to do vitality damage, and ghosts specifically do cold. So you are going to want to keep something of an eye on that. And this is really where you want to keep an eye on that kind of thing. You can avoid them, at least for the most part, in Act 2 very easily. But if you like to explore, or if you really need the experience, you are going to want to look pretty seriously at some vitality resistance to at least help you get through these areas. This is a little bit of a problem. Also, the Crossbowmen there, absolute nightmare if you don't have the piercing resistance you need to stave off that damage. Because boy howdy do they hit hard, and there's a stronger version of them called Deathbolt Archers that in fact do even more damage. Now you'll notice there it is. I used a potion there because there is a slightly overwhelming amount of enemies, and as I stated before, this is a Skeletal Gargantuan, which you really don't want to be seeing. It is somewhat problematic. Skeletal Gargantuans tend to cause problems when you're fighting them because they can root you just like this. You'll see I've got the spikes around me, I'm rooted. It's a little tough to see because of my various passive protection effects that are going on. So it can sometimes be somewhat difficult to see. We want to get rid of you because you're doing too much chaos and vitality damage. So it can be a little bit difficult to see the spikes if you do have a lot of effects around you like I do here, but you could see it somewhat clearly there, and he was causing some problems there, and this is going to be something of a small issue. I'm trying to kill, there we go. Just needed that last health potion to push me over. Yeah, this isn't worth it. I don't need the elemental resistances as much as I need that pierce resistance. Those archers were still hitting me pretty hard because, well, I do have 72% pierce resistance, but they were still hitting me pretty hard. Pierce resistance, the thing about pierce damage is that it doesn't care about your regular armor. It's basically a percentage of your physical damage that's ignoring armor. Is a basic way of explaining it so you have a better understanding. So let's say you had 50% pierce resistance for a really clear one. Let's say you normally do 100 physical damage and you have 50% piercing damage. That 50% piercing damage means that 50 of your 100 physical damage is going to completely ignore the armor of the target. And your pierce resistance is going to mitigate that 50 rather than the whole amount. This doesn't seem like a lot, but it can be quite substantial. As you can see from these archers here, there's a huge number of archers, and with this particular build, because it is somewhat melee focused, and the inability to move sometimes, this does make archers sometimes quite difficult to deal with. For, say, Inquisitor or a specifically ranged class, this would be less of a problem. Unfortunately, this guy is summoning specifically the archers, which is really unfortunate. We've got to take out some of these guys. There we go. So even with a good amount of pierce resistance, you're still going to get really heavily whacked if you're not paying enough attention. Or, if there's a Skeletal Gargantuan, you can't move. So, that was just a clear demonstration of why pierce resistance is so important at this particular point. No, I don't need that. It's not as good. Note the fire damage. The resistances are okay. I like that pierce resistance, but I'm already at 72% pierce resistance, so I don't need more. Lightning resistance, I don't need it all. There's not going to be a whole lot of lightning. There'll be a small area up ahead pretty soon where there are some lightning users, but it's a very small quantity and they're not guaranteed. I need the aether and physical resistance out of my current shield more. Okay, this is interesting. This is very interesting. This is a great sword. Now, normally, it isn't quite as quick as this to replace an epic weapon, normally. But this fits exactly what I'm trying to do. Yes, I'll lose 2 points inner focus, but this sword is doing elemental damage, and it is +2 to Panetti's. Now, as I stated before, Aether Woe is in fact really good for where I picked it up, which was in the Warden's Cellar, because I was about to fight a large number of Aether Corruptions and Ethereals. I'm still going to be fighting a certain amount of them, but they're not, unlike with Act 1, which is predominantly Ethereals and Aether Corruptions, i.e. zombies, which count. Only about the last portion of the act is going to have Aether Corruptions, and I'm not even 100% sure they count as that. I would have to re-examine the numbers. It used to, I know that much, but I don't know if it does anymore, especially since this game updated today. I'm assuming bug fixes. So, yes, I will be equipping the Superior Steel Longsword of the Sage just as soon as I can get that cunning. Unfortunately, I don't have the cunning I need at this particular junction. We're going to slap that into Spirit for now. But we will eventually have that. I'm using shields. This is, I mean, that... Yes, there's more armor, but it's the wrong kind of resistance and not enough of them. Another gun. Leg wraps of prowess. Elemental resistance is nice, but I have vitality on the Hermit's leg guards, and I have all that armor from the Ancient Armor plate, so I'm going to pass on that. I could put an Ancient Armor plate on the green pants, but quite frankly, as I've stated before, green you really don't want to put a component on because it's not going to last you long enough. This is an interesting question. But the lower armor, the elemental resistance is nice, but the lower armor does kind of push it away, especially since I don't do pierce and bleeding damage. Pierce and bleeding damage again, yeah, I don't really need that. So this is really what we're talking about here. That's not bad. A little early. I'm not going to equip that now because it's a little bit earlier than I would have liked to have equipped that. If I had Calidor's Tempest, I would probably have equipped those. It had good resistances. The armor I sacrificed a little bit of, sure, but the fire and aether increases would have been really nice. But anyways, back to the point. Because I don't have Calidor's Tempest, and I won't for a couple of level ups, I have to do Menhir's Will, and I have to do military conditioning, Aether Woe isn't going to be as good as that longsword that I got that increases Panetti's replicating missile and elemental damage. All of my abilities right now do elemental damage or keep me alive, which is exactly what you want to see in a build. Generally speaking, you want that, okay, I want to do elemental damage, here it is. Now, I've mentioned this on the subreddit before, but there is a potential problem normally with dealing only one specific damage type, namely that any enemy with a high enough resistance to that damage type is going to cause you problems. Now, this doesn't apply to elemental damage, because elemental damage is technically actually 3 different damage types wrapped into one. It is fire, ice, and lightning, being dealt in equal measure. So, as a result of that, you can do elemental damage and not really worry that much if somebody has resistance. They would have to be resistant to all 3 elements in order for you to actually have a significant amount of damage reduction to your damage. And besides the fact, even if that is a potential issue, don't forget that I also intend on bringing in some fire and aether damage from Kalidor's Tempest and Restless Power. So there is going to be, well, the fire is a type of elemental damage, but I am bringing in aether damage as well. Actually, what I am hoping to find in the future is what is known as the empowered version of Aether Woe. Now, all epic items under level 50 have an well, I can't say all, because I haven't necessarily seen an empowered version of everything, but most, if not all, of the epic items that are under level 50, if you look down at the bottom, required player level 17, if they have under level 50, there's probably an empowered version that you can get when you're closer to level 50, which is just a stat-boosted version of that piece of equipment. There's all kinds, but I need to Panetti this. But what we're really looking at here is later on when I'm closer to level 50 or whatever, and I have Kalidor's Tempest fully increased, and I'm actually doing Aether damage, that's when Aether Woe, or the Empowered Aether Woe, is really going to potentially be coming online and doing what I needed to do. Why are these people so problematic? Well, first off, they're already tough to hit, so I need more than the usual amount of offensive ability. Second, of course, the cold and vitality. My vitality is only 28%. My ice is only, my cold is only 42%. I was going to say 41. So I am going to have a little bit of a problem. But this area here is a bit tough if you're not prepared enough for it. As you can see, even though I have some of the resistances I need, I'm only mostly surviving because of the soldier skill, of Menhir's Will, and the fact that I have a shield. It's primarily what's keeping me alive right now. And the fact that Panetti's Replicating Missile doesn't care as much about accuracy, or at least of the tendency to miss ghosts. You could see the dodge there. You could see it occasionally dodge. That means I straight up missed, not because my offensive ability wasn't high enough, but because their defensive ability was so much higher. Because they're ghosts, it's kind of a ghost thing. So, that is something you should keep in mind. If you are entirely reliant on regular attacks, and you have not followed my recommendation of at least having one skill that can clear groups, ghosts are going to kill you. And that's, well, it wouldn't be a problem to just simply skip this area here. That's a relatively easy choice to make if you really need to. There's not much in here to get. Later on, you're not going to have that option. You're not going to have the luxury of ignoring the existence of ghosts. They will come after you in what is known as the Arkovian Undercity if you haven't been there. Ghosts absolutely everywhere. Skeletons too, but it's the ghosts that are the real problem. Because of their defensive ability, their high dodge rates. So, if you aren't properly prepared by this point, if you can't go in here and have a decent enough time, you're gonna probably die a lot at the Arkovian Undercity. So kind of use this as a testing ground as to how well you do in the opening of the next act, which is the Arkovian Undercity. Well, the next act is technically, the liberation of Homestead, is what I usually term that act, and you'll see what I mean when we get there. But the Arkovian Undercity is definitely the opening part of the opening chapter of that act. Definitely. So, the problem with Cadence against ghosts is that there's a decent chance I'll miss the big hit and then just basically throw it away, which can really set your damage output behind. But I have Panetti's, so I'm not that concerned about it. He fell back and absolutely all of his cronies died. That was not a smart move, guy. Additionally, if they have shields, which this guy does, that's another chance to miss because he can't, just as you saw there, block. Yeah, you can see how this is going terribly for me because of just how high his block rate is and his dodge rate. If I didn't have Menhir's Will, we would definitely be having a problem here. But this is a good time to drink some tea. No, it's not. There we go. Now it's a good time to drink tea. Yeah, I could do with some more cold and vitality resistance. I didn't want to open that up, thank you. Come on. There we go. And then here's Will's back up. So we can... Eventually, just through attrition, I will win this. But you can definitely see a couple of the potential flaws here. I do need higher offensive ability. I thought I might have high enough, but no, definitely not. I definitely need more. Inner Focus does help with that, but... And so does Iskandra's Elemental Exchange, I think. Maybe not necessarily at this point. Yeah, not yet. That's later on. Okay. Fair enough. There we go. Come on. Okay, here we go. We're getting there. And we'll just shoot some more missiles at you, or miss the first one. That's fine, too. And here's Willow's down, but I have a health potion prepped. Use that really quick, just in case. I'm not going to be arrogant again and assume that I'll be fine. Come on. Nope, we're not hitting. There we go. Ah, hello. Now, I could equip this. Yes, absolutely. I don't do quite enough cold damage to make that worthwhile, but if you were going with a specifically cold build, this would be amazing. But I am doing broader elemental damage, and I do have the much more useful Superior Steel Longsword. Now, the damage per second changed a little bit. Don't worry about it. It's just because my stats changed a little bit. Now, again, I could still equip all of this. I could go with a pure cold soldier, which is an interesting idea. I could theoretically drop Cadence and go into a combination Olexra's Flash Freeze and Trozan's Sky Shard and just absolutely run through that. It's an idea. It's not a bad idea either, because this is a really nice shield. And there's a decent chance I can get more as well. Now, let me really quickly do some mental calculations. If I were to do this, I would pull these points out. I would keep Menhir's Will. I would pull out these, that's 19. Pull this out, that would be 31. Pull this out, that would be 47. That's 4 up here. You know what? Crack this open and we'll do it. We will absolutely do this. I'm just going to crack open these bits right here. And we are absolutely going to go wild with this. This is an interesting and rare opportunity. Poison, elemental, cold, which I don't need, lightning and aether. Potentially possible. Alright, let's typo this out. This is the glory of improv building. I can absolutely switch things up at the drop of a hat, and it's glorious. We're going to keep this, though. At least for now, just in case. That's not as important anymore. But again, we'll keep that. So we'll sell these. Keep this. Also, for reference, if you are a new player, or you simply don't have enough of these, keep the Spectral Longswords. You can use them as crafting ingredients for Haunt, and Haunt is a component of a lot of different other relics. Desert Sting I don't care about. So what we're going to do... Oh, wait, there's an amulet there I did not get rid of. Hold on. There we go. So, this is going to be fairly interesting. I'll probably have to switch up my constellations as well. But let's switch things up. I have a devotion skill on this. That's right, I have my turtle shell. I'll need to switch this to something else. I can put it on Menhir's Will? Okay, that's fine. I was not aware of that, but I've never tried that before, so okay. Put those on. I don't want to. I'm putting it in shield still, so I don't even need to change my devotions. So that's good. We're going to finish off Menhir's Will really quick. And then we're going to go up to here. Olexra Splash Freeze. I want to grab military conditioning for the health. Slap more points here and grab Trozan's Sky Shard. What is the cooldown on this? 2.9. Okay. 5.8. Alright. Now, these are monster infrequents, so I'm going to do something a little unusual and slap components on them to really accent the build. I'm going to put the Aether Row in here so I don't forget that I have it. I'm going to put the shield in here. I'm going to put the sword in here. I'm going to put the ring in here because this ring still does provide me with the elemental resistance I kind of need. Put these in here. We're going to store our components really quick. And this spectral longsword in here. Dynamite I don't necessarily need right now. Cold. There should be something better than this. Let me see. It's not bad. Physical resistance. Okay. I thought so. I had to double check. I wasn't 100% sure, but my memory was correct. There is a physical drop here. Alright. That's interesting. Not important now, but it will be in future, if I stick with this. Now, let's see here. Again, the nice thing about how I've been building so far is that this isn't going to be too much of a change. I'm going to look at the components really quick. There is something better for... That's just the regular one. Shield, Steel, Ice Spike. That's the regular one that I've been talking about already. Here we go. And then I'm pretty sure there was a better shield component as well. Unless I decide to go with not shield block, but I want to go into... What am I really missing here? Aether, really. Kind of want to go with Wardstone, I think. That's elemental bleeding. Not bad. It's not quite what I'm thinking. Where is... There's something that increases aether resistance. I cannot remember off the top of my head what it's called, but I know I want it and I'll recognize it when I see it. There is also this. I might return at some point... Oh, that's useful. To the elemental damage. There's a lot of potential there still. But at least, here it is. But what I really want to see... Oh, that's interesting. I forgot that that couldn't be equipped on weapons. I think I'm going to ultimately go with wards. Yeah, let's go with Wardstone at least for now. I could always change it later. Oh, nope. I cannot. That is not for shields. I've forgotten. Alright, what we're going to do then is just go straight into... See, the problem is I can't remember where in Tarnation... There's something that increases... Oh, wait. It's using rings, though. Where did it go? Where did my delicious aether resistance go? There it is. Head armor, that's why. Oh, right, alright. We will just go then with the serrated shell then. Slap that on there. Alright, so that wasn't quite what I was looking for. I'd forgotten what some of these components were because brain cramps. But yeah, we're going to go with this for at least a little while, and this should be fairly interesting. Now we have this. Yep, that's fine. We have this. That's fine. So we're really not going to be looking to do any kind of damage with the regular melee attacks anymore. I probably will not be using these. Now, how bad is this going to be? Okay, that's not bad. Freeze. Okay, so even though your ghosts do still freeze easily, I was wondering if they changed that, because it doesn't make sense, but I'm kind of concerned about the update. I was not 100% sure necessarily if they would have changed any of this, but nope, we're apparently fine. My regular attacks still do decent amounts of damage, even if it's not quite the same level. I could put Cadence back on and just leave it non-elemental, because there is the physical resistance that Olexra's Flash Freeze will get. Now, this isn't a build I've actually tried. To be completely honest, I've almost always gone with Elemental and Aether. So this is a new experience for me using the Ice version. So this is quite interesting. I might stick with this in the long term, because I've never actually run this before. And I mean, for now it seems effective, but that can be deceiving. It is interesting that Olexra's Flash Freeze does provide me with physical resistance reduction, so that can be quite powerful. We have the Shield Spectral. This is for, yeah, I was going to say Necromancers and Nightblades. It's not going to beat out the Spectral. I didn't even put on Chilling Weapons. There we go. There we go. You have this here. Yes, this could be quite interesting. Now, keep in mind that first off, again, I am doing improv build. Second off, I just happen to get a huge amount of equipment that really benefits this. So I was fairly fortunate in that aspect. Keep in mind, this isn't exactly the ideal shield. We have the Knight's Chill that I'm not really using, but that's fine. I'm gonna go right into this now. And yes, this is the reason ultimately why I chose... I got a question, actually, on Reddit, why I chose Turtle Shell over the Assassin's Blade, and it's because I knew I was going to use a shield. I decided that early on, and regardless of what I changed, I would probably still use that. Pierce and Bleeding Resistance. At Pierce, I don't need Pierce. If that was like Aether Resistance, more than Milton's Cask, Elemental, Pierce, or Aether, or whatever, yeah, maybe. But then again, with the changes I've made to my build, Milton's Cask might become more relevant than it has been. Yeah, we need to actually change the boots because I'm no longer doing elemental damage. This is for a combination of Necromancer and Oathkeeper. I have a new devotion point. We're just going to slap it in here. Now, doesn't this do... This is acid. Okay. Alright, so... we now have this new direction we're taking the build because an opportunity arose. A really fantastic opportunity arose to completely alter the build and take it in a totally new direction. And I love that. This is the fun part of improving. This is why I play. You get stuff and it's just like, oh, now I have all these new options. And it's fantastic. And this could work. This could become my favorite way of playing Arcanist Soldier. Because, like I said, I've never done this. This has just not occurred to me in my various ages of improving. So this could be fantastic. Anyways, as you can see, this particular location, getting back on location point, is still very heavily covered in the undead. So You know, another benefit, actually, of the new direction this build is taken, I'll want to now prioritize a certain amount of skill cooldown, of course, but a new benefit of this is absolutely that I can freeze the archers from a larger distance away and not necessarily have to worry quite so much about incoming piercing damage. This could be quite interesting. Now, I'm aware of the fact, you're probably asking yourself, well, why? You know that Olexra's Flash Freeze is going to, at some point, give you bonus physical damage, so why not go into Cadence now, get your regular damage back up? There are two reasons for this. First off, right now, a vast majority of... I have to see them to actually hit them with a Sky Shard? Yes, okay, that's interesting. I didn't think that wall was blocking my way, and that's strange. But anyways, back to the point. First off, right now, my damage is concentrated in cold. My weapon deals a lot of cold damage, my shield is boosting cold damage. It is smartest for me at this particular point to ignore physical damage, at least temporarily, and focus on cold damage. Now, when I do get around to getting to this absolute 0 point, yes, then I'll need to go back into Soldier and start thinking about what physical damage skills I want to incorporate. And that'll be a completely different conversation at that point. And that assumes that I'm going to stick with the build. I've been assuming until then I was going to stick with Elemental, but here we are now with Cold. So, that doesn't mean I still cannot incorporate some Elemental, though. Keep in mind that Olexra's Flash Freeze does, in fact, reduce fire resistance. And if I go all the way with the Cold and Lightning damage, I can go into Star Pact, which boosts my Cold and Lightning damage, and still keep a certain amount of fire from the elemental damage. Now, I wouldn't necessarily go back into Panetti's, but I could go back into Iskandra's and the Discord version of Cadence. I could still go back into that and make it work just fine. I might not necessarily do so, but I could. So this opens up some interesting new avenues that I will have to examine as I get equipment, which will influence my build a little bit as time goes on. Like I said, I made this complete change because I got two pieces from the same enemy that really were conducive to this build, and it was just a major turnaround. Now, also keep in mind that I did not change Inner Focus or Menhir's Will, and in fact, I finished leveling up Menhir's Will. This is primarily because this gives me the durability. If I needed an adjusting period, okay? The one thing nobody tells you about improv building in Grim Dawn is, to some extent, you have to adjust. I've mentioned before that adjusting from a shield to a non-shield build is tough. You get so used to automatically counting for that shield protection, that shield damage blocked, that when you no longer have it, you keep on assuming you do, and you play like you still do, and that is not good. You die much more frequently after switching off of a shield setup. So if you're going to use a shield, commit to it. If you aren't using a shield, then whatever. But once you decide, hey, I'm going to use a shield, don't switch off. That's why I said, guaranteed, no matter what happens, I'm sticking with the shield. Because if I stop carrying a shield, I am going to have become so used to the shield blocking that the shield offered that I will not adjust quickly enough. So the increase to physique and the increases to Menhir's Will, besides being already in my original plan and still potentially working very well with the cold build, since Menhir's Will and military conditioning don't care what kind of damage type you're doing, then they'll give me that breathing room that I will need to better adjust. So now we got in here, we'll increase this. Now once I'm done with Trozan Sky Shard, at least the first stage of it, I'll go back to Soldier. Maybe I'll take Overguard, maybe I'll take Blitz. I have Milton's Cask, it increases those. Shield Training, of course. I'll probably temporarily take these and see how I feel about it. If I don't like it, I probably will pass. Actually, no, I'm going to change my mind about that. Hold on, let me drink some tea and think. Yeah, for now, I don't care. I don't need physical damage at this point, because as I stated, my equipment is all right now geared towards elemental/cold damage. The leftovers of my build, increasing elemental damage still works. Like I said, elemental damage itself can still work, just not quite as well. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're still going pretty strong here on where we need to be. And also, this removes the problem that I was having of my stats being too low to equip the equipment I needed to. I didn't have the cunning for the sword, and I didn't have the spirit for the amulet. That's no longer a problem. It was just the right time, basically. I was extremely fortunate. A potential new setup happened, or became possible, at the exact moment I was having a bit of stat troubles. Now, I could have overcome the stat troubles, don't get me wrong. I could absolutely have just played the long game, raised my stats slowly. If I was really in need of the boost, I could have equipped some emeralds onto some of my equipment and artificially boosted my stats if I was really desperate. I didn't happen to be really desperate there, but it's something I could have done. So I could have just artificially enhanced my stats, potentially. But here we are with a ready-made setup, and I had the points and the groundwork laid to be able to make that transition very smoothly. Now, if I was a high contrast combination like Demolitionist and Necromancer, which is my favorite high contrast example, then that would have been much harder to pull off, because they don't have a whole lot of damage types in common, those two particular classes. So making a switch often requires more of an overhaul. I only had to pull out Cadence, Panetti's Replicating Missile, and Iskandra's Elemental Exchange to focus completely on cold damage. I could have left Iskandra's, and I could have left Cadence, pull out Panetti's, and gone into Olexra's Flash Freeze. But that wouldn't necessarily have given me the kind of cold damage, and again, I'm not really looking at this particular junction for if I'm going to try this out, and I'm so far very happy with it, I needed a full commit. So I kept the skills that didn't care, and I dropped the skills that were specifically geared towards that elemental damage. And my cooldown on Trozan Sky Shard is low enough that, frankly, it's not that big of a deal, and as eventually I can get to here, reduce that cooldown even more, the 2% casting speed, and we're in really good shape. We're going to pick this up. We're going to pick this up. And we're going to go over here really quick. So I'll just go through this other area over here just to talk a little bit more about the build, where I want to take this currently, my thoughts on it at that point, and we'll give a bit more of a run-through and have a more interesting time with this. So, thus far, it's working out very well. Now, when you can't freeze people when they're coming out of the ground, which is fairly interesting. I didn't think you could, because you can't stun them when they're coming out of the ground either, I know. But Olexra's Flash Freeze does so much damage in a short period of time that I'm not sure I care. But yes, we have a lot of potential here. This should be fairly interesting. I'm kind of excited. I'm very excited, actually. Let me rephrase that. I'm very excited. Oh! Pierce, Poison, Aether. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the kind of shoes I need. It has all the resistances that I'm looking for. Well, I could do with some elemental resistance, but that's fine. It increases the armor. Yes. Absolutely. Alright. So I don't need to put any points in any stats this time. That's fine. What I'm wondering is if I'll find a shield that'll give me a combination of Soldier and Ice Arcanist skills. Though it's not strictly necessary either. Yeah, I just want to wait for my Olexra's Flash Freeze to come back up. Look at how much damage that did. That was fantastic. I mean, with this combination right here, I'm basically immortal for a long time. Look, you're not dealing damage to me anymore. I am now just beating on you for free. Energy Potion, drop Sky Shards on you. I can box you just fine. Just drop Sky Shards on you as I go. I could freeze you if it gets ugly. I don't want to use the energy to do so, but I could. There's Menhir's will. Any hope you had of killing me is gone. So far, this is great. I love this. I can't believe I've never thought of this combination before. This belt. No. The reason why I'm not but that cold damage, though. Alright. Ultimately, I am going to take this belt. You have higher armor, you have cold damage, which I need. You have aether resistance, which right now is my lowest of the 3 stats that we're changing here. The pierce resistance... Pierce resistance goes down a little bit, but I still have 65%. That's fine. I have 50% aether. I need more fire resistance, definitely, but I can equip items for that if I really needed to. Yeah, this is an interesting helmet. If I were still doing my elemental aether fire combination, if I was still looking to get into Restless Power, I would probably equip this, because even though it is potentially for a soldier Oathkeeper combination, if you look at the fact that neither the Oathkeeper nor the soldier can do aether damage, this is really intended for either soldier or Oathkeeper with a Arcanist in a Restless Power build looking to do this. That is what this is designed for, and you can see that from its damage types. And really all epic and legendary items are designed for a general kind of build. I just described this one. They all are designed for that. For example, Alder's Inquisition here is for any combination of Inquisitor, obviously, with the elemental damage, Demolitionist, or Oathkeeper. And quite honestly, whichever one of the other two you take doesn't really make a difference, because the core there is Inquisitor because of all that elemental damage. Let me see. Aether Elemental. I lose the Vitality. Get a little bit more Aether and Elemental, lower regular damage. We have Physical and Lightning, but I'm not doing that much Physical right now. This other one gives me health. No, we're not equipping that one. Aether Fire Spellblade. No. Hand Cannon. Just no. Not really needed. That's pets. Fire. That's got that fire and poison resistance, though. Yeah, we'll equip that, actually. Again, we're looking at the fire and poison resistance here. The chaos resistance is okay, not strictly necessary, but it's a nice benefit. More health regenerated. Not as much armor, so the old amulet does give me that, but I've got a bit more offensive ability, more health regeneration. We'll equip that. We need those resistances. And that's just not even, I mean, shoulders. I get physical and elemental resistance, I get no resistances here. Lower armor, that's just nonsense. That's just nonsense. Why did they give me weak sauce shoulder plates? And then Olexra's Flash Freeze just takes out everyone. Cool. Well, while you guys are freezing to death, I'll just, oh, wait, there's some more guys here. Hold on. Boom, there we go. And it'll hit you with some Sky Shard. And nice. Now, another thing I want to point out is that there are certain... The real benefit of proper improving, and improving is something you have to get, you have to work at, get experience, and you don't just sit down and start improving a build necessarily. And the reason why improving takes a little bit of experience to fully do, and I'm not saying this, I've been improving a long time and I'm an expert and you can't do it because you're new. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that improving is a learned skill. It is something you get experience in, because you have to realize if you're sitting there watching this and you see this build doing this well and you're like, oh cool, that's awesome, why... what will it take me to get there? Well, you might possibly try to rush to this. This will get you killed. As I stated earlier, you need, in the early game, some form of area damage, and it needs to be in your first class level. Now I'm going to explain what I mean by class level in a hot minute. Now, I call these little numbers down here, these are class levels. For example, right now I'm at Arcanist class level 3. I'm at Soldier class level 2. Olexra's Flash Freeze, although you can rush to it in 2 levels. So level 3, you can theoretically get this. You can start leveling this up. You're going to have a little bit of a tougher time because you're sacrificing your regular... You get regular stats, but you're sacrificing primarily things like Inner Focus that'll get you the spirit you need to cast this consistently. You're missing out on things like Menhir's Will and military conditioning that will keep you alive. When I started this walkthrough, I chose Force Wave specifically because it provides me with a stun and does pretty good damage for how early it is, and it has only a 2.8 skill recharge. That's it. That's pretty low. That's less than 3 seconds, and that's at level 1. Great. Fantastic. We have a decent stun on this thing, and we have pretty good damage. That kept me alive through that early game really effectively, to where I could then swap this for Panetti's with the infrastructure of Iskandra's, which gave me the energy I needed to cast Panetti's consistently. Okay? If I'd rushed this, then I would have blasted a flash freeze and sat there, and anything tough enough to survive the initial freeze, which at that point would have been a lot of stuff, because at level 4 you're going into this with 3 points, which isn't that much damage. And then they're going to hit you really hard. And then you're going to, you can use, health potions, your constitution stuff. I'm not saying it's impossible to carry this off. It's more difficult, though. Unnecessarily so. So, unless you're looking for a specific ice build, and you've pre-planned a build out, and you have, some specific ideas on what skills you'll want in your build in the future, don't try to rush to this. Use other things. What am I stuck on? That was weird. If that bothered you, I am terribly sorry. That was a weird visual effect. But don't try to rush this, because this is something you kind of have to then flex into. And like I said, I've specifically been leveling up in such a way that I can do this switch very easily. If I had done the Assassin's Blade early on, as people normally do, I'm talking about the people who pre-plan their builds and they go for the optimum builds, they typically go into Assassin's Blade because the Assassin's Mark is very powerful for a correctly built soldier. It can be huge. I went with the tortoise. I keep calling him the turtle, it's the same difference. I went with the turtle. I got the turtle shell. I got my delicious bonuses to health and defense, my shield block, all these wonderful things. Actually, is there a shield block on? No, just physique requirement for shields is down. But I went for that first because I knew that I wouldn't necessarily maintain what I was necessarily wanting to do. I went into this specifically with the idea of a elemental soldier arcanist build. That was my initial concept, my rough idea. I sat down and I'm like, well, I want to play a soldier arcanist with an elemental damage focus. And I wanted to do that because, look, you've got... I wanted a good class that absolutely any player could pick up and use if they really wanted to, and could customize for themselves, that was decently safe and did some pretty decent damage. That is what I was looking for. This just is what immediately came to mind, and it's something I really enjoy playing. Now, that being said, as I stated earlier, the elemental damage build is pretty safe for new players. You build elemental damage, any element, fire, lightning, ice, whatever, plus aether. Maybe a little bit of physical. It depends on how you feel and what you get. Sure. It's pretty easy to keep track of. Nothing really complicated going on. This still offers me a decent amount of damage types, though, because you might be thinking to yourself, well, now you've eliminated the fire damage, and now you're eliminating the aether damage. You are incorrect. As I pointed out, fire still is relevant with this build, so elemental damage is still somewhat relevant with this build, because Olexra's Flash Freeze boosts the amount of fire damage you do, so it's still relevant. I could still go Elemental. As I stated earlier, I could have kept Iskandra's Elemental Exchange. I could have kept Cadence where it was, but I wanted to really delve deep. And also, I'm not 100% sure I'll necessarily want those skills either. Again, it depends on what kind of items I pick up. That's not great. It does not give me the resistances I need. I don't need the physical damage right now. I don't need the aether damage right now. I'm not doing internal trauma damage. I'm not using Blade Arc. It's just not something I need at all. But yeah, I actually, to some extent, I'm swapping aether out for physical damage is the essential rough idea here, which works a little bit better with Soldier. I might be sacrificing a certain amount of passive skills. Maybe. When I go to Soldier level 3, I'll be putting points into shield training and probably leave level 3 alone. I'm not going to go into Overguard right now. I'm not going to go into Blitz right now. I don't need physical damage until I get to absolute 0. I don't personally like Overguard. It's a personal preference. It's something I wish was a passive or something that auto-triggered. I would prefer it as. I know Soldier already has a lot of these. It's just how I would prefer that to work. So I'm not going to get Overguard, because I'm just not that big of a fan of it. I'll get shield training. You know, keep it nice and simple. If you're following along at home, you know, keep it nice and simple. Don't have to think about it too much or worry about it too much. Just kind of ease you into improv building. But this works. This can work. Now keep in mind, another thing that I want to point out to you if you're following along with this build. This is Wradlith's Bulwark of Mending. That boss I killed in that cave is the only person who drops this. That does not mean this is the only shield that can pull off this kind of effect. That's not what that means. It just means I was stupid lucky and got this. And I'm going to use it. I also got the Bludgeon. Now, Bludgeons are everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. You could theoretically make the switch over with the Bludgeon alone, especially if it boosts a Soldier skill, and then use some kind of shield that also happens to increase either Olexra's Flash Freeze or Trozan's Sky Shard, whatever. So you can sub out the shield for another one if you wanted, but I made the switch primarily on the strength that I am stupid lucky on that shield drop, and it's a pretty big deal. These are by the way, the bugs that, these are the bees that do poison damage, if you didn't figure that out already. They're so weak. Here's a hero here, so that might be a problem. Maybe. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a problem. But you freeze, so I don't much care. You're not going to be a problem. There we go. Yeah, that's pets. So, yes, I made this switch because I had a golden opportunity to do so, and you know what? I've never tried it, so let's try it. You know, I forgot to do something. What I should have done, I was so distracted by my talking. That's on me. I didn't explode the, I did not explode the blockage up here for the quest. But anyways, yes, you can absolutely do this, but start, like I said, start with something that you can immediately use in the early game, something that can last you. And then the elemental, even if you followed me exactly and you make this switch at exactly this point, maybe your equipment isn't ideal for this, maybe it's better, potentially, you know, I don't know what epic items you've gotten that I haven't gotten. What monster infrequents you've gotten that I haven't gotten on this particular trip. Maybe you've been luckier than I have. Actually, given that I've been either at or over the recommended level for an area, you probably have been luckier than I am. You probably have better stuff than I do. Because you've probably, if you're a newer player at least, you've probably died a couple of times, lost a little bit of experience, and you're not quite the same level. I have a viewer in the comments who asked me, you know, how did you get to this level so fast? I'm usually level 18 at this point, and that was the video on Burwich Village, I believe. And I just don't die as much because I know what's coming. I build my resistances short term for it. And a newer player isn't necessarily going to have that knowledge unless they've been watching my video and then going, or watching anybody else's video, really. I'm not the only one who goes through these areas. But unless they watch somebody else go through an area, see what damage types are being dealt, and then build accordingly. But not a whole lot of other YouTubers, at least that I've seen, correct me if I'm wrong, but not a whole lot of them are talking about what kind of damage types they're seeing fly at them. Some do, not a lot do, but some do. Oh wait, I actually need some royal jelly for a quest later, so we're actually going to keep 3 of that out. And we're going to stash. Now, okay, that's just Trozan Sky Shard. It's still not as good as Milton's Cask in the long run. Oh, yeah, I'm not seeing anything. I was just checking really quick to see if there's anything. Bleeding resistance, which I don't really need. Any of the resistances from my current rings more. Yeah, there's just really not anything I need out of this. Alright. But what we are going to do is we are going to end this episode here. I am super excited about this new potential. Like I said, I've heard a couple of people talk about this kind of build, but I've never actually personally tried it. And, you know, I've got the equipment for it. It's as good a time as any. Essentially, beyond changing Cadence, Iskandra's Exchange, and Panetti's Replicating Missile out for Olexra's Flash Freeze and Trozan's Sky Shard, beyond that, the core concept of the build hasn't changed much. We're still talking about elemental damage. We've simply swapped potential aether damage for physical damage, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't incorporate aether damage either with or instead of physical damage. That might be too much damage diversity. It might not be. Depends on, again, what equipment we pick up, but I could just go into Caladora's Tempest, grab that Fire and Aether, bring an Inferno that's Fire, Aether, and Lightning. So we could do Caladora's Tempest. It could be highly relevant. It's an excellent combination with Alexa's Flash Freeze. Trust me, I've done that combination before. That's one combo I have done. That's really nice. I'm not going to do it right now because I do want to take this to the extent of cold damage. But ultimately, the reason why I dropped Panetti's Replicating Missile is because Trozan's Sky Shard, first off, is adjusted by the Chilled Spectral Bludgeon, changes the lightning to cold. Bit risky, but overall, not a bad thing right now. Not a whole lot. This is normal mode, so the enemies aren't going to have hugely powerful resistances, so you don't have to worry quite so much about your damage diversity until Elite, and you have to really worry about it in Ultimate, just to make sure you're not getting stymied by some specific enemy. Actually, isn't it pronounced stymied? I think it's pronounced stymied. Anyways, maybe I'll do Arcane Will. I still have the pants on, the Hermit's leg guards, so maybe I'll go into Arcane Will. It does combo really well with the passives that the soldier has, so it is something I'm kind of looking to get into. Maven Sphere, of course. I still want that. Again, I'll probably take conversion, but if I find the right equipment, I won't need to. Let me see. I want to take a quick look so you can see we have extra chance for lightning damage. This is generally why, by the way, I don't usually go into Trozan's. That's a percentage chance of lightning damage, and it's kind of like, well, yay, I guess. Plus 4 energy for extra crit damage, extra lightning damage, and a chance of extra bonus lightning damage. Thanks, yes. Now keep in mind, the reason why I don't... This is actually one last thing I want to point out. I don't mind focusing most on cold, because if you look at Star Pact, that is specifically physical and aether damage converted to cold damage. I forgot about the aether. I straight up forgot. Caladora's Tempest might be a smart move, actually. That could be really interesting. I'll have to think about that. I'm not going to go into it now. I still want to focus on Trozan, Sky Shard, and Alexra's Flash Freeze, set up some more passives. I really want to get to Mental Alacrity and really see what I can do with that. I might actually skip over shield training for this soldier. Let me see here. That has some potential if I keep with the cold. Veterancy is okay. I might temporarily skip it. I might stick with that. You know what? I think temporarily I might leave Soldier here where it is. For now. Go full blast into Arcanist, try and get Olexra's Flash Freeze and Trozan's Sky Shard up. Maybe. I'll have to think about this from now until the start of the next episode. It's an idea I can play with, grabbing Arcane Will, of course. And really go hardcore into that cold damage and see what I can really do with this. I need to talk to Steven Skinner really quick. I forgot about that. But it's something I can definitely play with. I have, at the very minimum, what I wanted here. I can, with spare points, go into these, or go into these earlier, depending on what equipment I get. It's all about that equipment. This doesn't have... Oh, this does have... Alright, yeah, we're going to replace the Ordered Gold Band of Butchery with the Skinner Family Seals, specifically because of the Skinner Family Seal, yes, I lose some elemental resistance, but I get that valuable Pierce resistance. And some physical damage, which I am definitely leaning towards reincorporating back into the build at some point. Also, I am respected by. I'm friendly with. Not respected by yet. Okay. So, I actually want to... This is going to extend the episode's time, but that's okay. I think this is important. I want to talk about reputation. At least the reputation of friendly factions. I'll talk about hostile factions later. When you get to a certain point... let me accidentally hit my spacebar. When you get to a certain point, you can open up the vendor here. And they have stages, in case you don't know. These I don't usually buy because I'm usually not a fan of buying my my temporary use items. This is okay, but overall I'm just not a big fan of buying these, especially with a normal difficulty character. They usually, well, at this point I have 50 grand, yes, I can afford this. I'm improving as well, so I have to keep in mind that at some point I may be doing a huge swap of my abilities like I just did this episode. So it's not something I normally do, and I also don't like to rely on these if I can avoid it. And in normal mode, you really don't need these anyways. Now here, I want to take a quick look at some of these equipments, see what's going on here. That's not going to replace anything. That's not going to replace... Just to see... Nah, none of these are worth it. You, of course, have the recipes that you can buy that'll get you more recipes, which you do really want. Each of these factions has a increase based on specific enemies. For example, as you can see here, you gain reputation from killing Cronley's gang members, completing any quests associated with Devil's Crossing, which is basically completing any quest given to you by somebody in Devil's Crossing or somebody who winds up in Devil's Crossing. Now, something that a lot of people don't know, and I want to mention this really quick here, is killing Cronley's gang does apply to the regular grunts. You don't just get reputation points for killing heroes. That's just where they tell you that you get reputation points. For every one enemy you kill of a faction, you get 1 reputation point towards their opposing faction. So every one Cronley's gang member I kill, Devil's Crossing gets a rep point. I get a rep point in Devil's Crossing. Let me rephrase that properly. So eventually you are going to get to respected. At that point you can do bounties. Unless you're... If you're starting a character normal, you aren't going to need to use bounties. Why? Because you're going to be basically running through the game 3 times with increasing difficulties. And once you get to Honored, which should happen sometime in Elite, you can buy this, which increases the amount of rep you get by 50%. So every one guy you kill gets 1.5 rep points. And by the time you're in Ultimate, you'll get to the Revered just fine. You don't really need to stop and do bounties, especially since a lot of the bounties that you'll... By the time you... Let me put it this way. By the time you have the ability to do a faction's bounties, the areas in which the bounties take place are probably weaker than you. For example, there is about half of the bounties available to Devil's Crossing take place in Burwich. Well, not specifically Burwich Village, but take place in Burwich outskirts, Burwich Village. Whacking your way through these areas at the time you can get to the bounty, and I'll be personally around early 30s by the time I get to Respected with Devil's Crossing. At that particular junction, it's kind of like, well, now I'm just breezing through these weak sauce guys. I'm not getting anything for this, and I'm only really getting experience and potential drops from the target of the bounty, if even that. It depends. And so I've personally never found bounties to be worth doing in normal. In Elite, maybe. In Ultimate, sure. But if this is a new character, you're going through normal, and you're going to go through Elite, and you're going to go through Ultimate with this character, whether you're new to the game or an experienced player who just really wants to run through the entire game with one character. Some people do that. I do that occasionally. Bounties aren't worth it. You only need to do bounties if you're starting in Elite or Ultimate, and you need to catch up on the reputation points you missed by not going into a specific difficulty. That is what bounties are really there for. Otherwise, you really don't need them. So, if you're a newer player, you're going to get to Respected pretty soon. If you've been following along, you're going to be pretty close to getting to Respected with Devil's Crossing. You're going to have the option to do bounties. You're in normal difficulty mode, you really don't need them. Even if you're level 23, a lot of the times, unless you're like level 20 or lower, the bounty enemies aren't going to be worth your time. It's just a waste of time. In my opinion, I've never had bounties really work out for me when I do them in normal. So maybe if by the time you get to Ultimate, because you had an unusually sparse Cronley's gang, it can happen, theoretically speaking. Random generation. Maybe in Ultimate you'll do a bounty or two, because by that point the enemies will be scaling to whatever level you are, and, well, almost always scaling to whatever level you are, and you actually can get pretty consistent bonuses from that. But otherwise, and I know for a fact, at least some people are going to say in the comments, well, you do get other rewards for these, you can get crafting materials. Yes, you can. But you can also lose them. For example, there's a bounty here in Devil's Crossing that requires you to just give the bounty table a tainted brain matter. That's a crafting material and something you may not have a lot of, and you may have to go farm that because you've been giving the bounty table all of your crafting materials. So it's kind of like, yes, you get some crafting materials, but you also have the potential to lose crafting materials, at least in the short term. Long term, you will get crafting materials, more than you're losing. Long term. But in normal mode with new players, you can't afford to lose those crafting materials in the short term. Not yet. Not until you've built up a decent stockpile. So, unless you're really looking for crafting materials and you're in Elite or Ultimate for some reason, and you don't want to farm regularly, which doesn't make sense, because farming is always more efficient than bounties, go for the bounties. But frankly, bounties are really there for the reputation points, and if you're starting in normal and you're gonna take this character the full way to Ultimate, don't bother. By the time you're done with the character, that character will be at the appropriate level of reputation, and you can also buy, at that point, the mandate for another character, because you can throw this into your transfer, a new character can take this and get reputation points way, way faster. At the end of the day, there is no reason to do bounties. Unless, again, you're starting at Ultimate and for some bizarre reason, you're just starting at Ultimate and you really need, for some reason, to get max rep with Devil's Crossing. Maybe you need access to these. I don't know. There is a possible... These are fairly powerful, so maybe you need a specific one of these. I can understand that. If you're starting a character on Ultimate and you need these, yeah, do bounties. Otherwise, don't bother. Bounties are just usually not worth it. I'll talk about bounties more in Ultimate and in Elite when I get this character there, but you're in normal mode right now, new player or no, don't bother right now. It's not worth it in normal. ever. It's never worth it normal. With that being said, thank you all very much for watching and kind of listening to my anti-bounty rant at the end there. If you like this, please like and subscribe. If you have questions, fire away in the comments section. I read them. I love questions. And there's no such thing as a stupid question in my book. Personally, that's my belief. Unless you ask, is the earth flat? In which case, we won't talk about it. But the answer is no, it's not. Otherwise, have a great 24 hours.